The conference hall had always smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive coffee. For 12 years, I had walked through those doors with my head high, believing every late night, every sacrificed holiday, every impossible decision had built something no one could erase. That morning I walked in wearing the navy suit my mother had bought me after my first promotion. She used to say, "Wear blue when you need people to remember your strength." I didn't know I would need every ounce of it. The boardroom buzzed with low conversation. Directors exchanged smiles that stopped the second I looked their way. A silence settled over the room like someone had quietly closed a lid. My husband, Daniel, sat near the head of the table. Not beside me. My chair, my seat for nearly a decade, had vanished. In its place stood a decorative plant. For a heartbeat, I thought someone had made a ridiculous mistake. I laughed softly. "Where's my chair?" Nobody answered. Daniel glanced up only long enough to say, "Sit in the gallery today, Claire." The gallery. The row reserved for observers. My stomach tightened. "I think you're confused." "No," he replied evenly. "Today's vote concerns executive restructuring. Until it's complete, you won't participate." I stared at him. "We built this company together. You married into it," one director corrected without meeting my eyes. The sentence landed harder than a slap. I looked around the room. Men I'd mentored, women I'd defended, people whose careers I'd protected. Every one of them avoided my eyes. Only Evelyn, the oldest board member, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "This wasn't discussed," I said. "It was," Daniel answered. "Not with me." No, he didn't even sound guilty. That hurt more than shouting ever could have. I slowly walked toward the gallery. Each step echoed, not because I accepted what they were doing. Because I wanted every person in that room to believe I had. As I passed my old seat, I noticed my nameplate lying upside down inside a cardboard box. Someone had packed my office before I'd even arrived. The meeting began. The chairman cleared his throat. "Due to concerns regarding leadership direction, the board proposes removing Claire Bennett as Chief Executive Officer effective immediately." Concern. Such a gentle word for betrayal. PowerPoint slides filled the screen. Charts, numbers, carefully selected statistics. Everything designed to paint me as the obstacle. Daniel presented them himself. "We need stability," he said. "Fresh leadership." Fresh. Interesting choice, considering every successful division in the presentation had been created under my leadership. I watched him take credit for projects he'd barely attended. Every compliment directed at him rested on years of my invisible work. I wanted to interrupt, to expose every lie. Instead, I folded my hands. People become careless when they believe they've already won. The vote passed, unanimously. Even Evelyn raised her hand after a long pause. Not because she agreed, because she knew resistance would accomplish nothing. The chairman smiled politely. "Claire, security will escort you while human resources discusses your transition package." Security. As though I were dangerous. I stood before anyone could reach me. "No need." Daniel finally looked directly at me. For the first time all morning. There was relief in his expression. Relief. He'd expected tears, begging, anger. Instead, I smiled. Not a bitter smile. A peaceful one. "I hope today's victory brings you everything you imagined." His eyebrows drew together. "I don't understand." "I know." I picked up the cardboard box containing my nameplate. It weighed almost nothing. Funny. 12 years. Reduced to a few office supplies. As I reached the door, someone behind me whispered, "She's taking this surprisingly well." I almost laughed. Calm isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the most dangerous thing in the room. Outside, rain had begun to fall. I sat alone in my car without starting the engine. My hands finally shook. The silence cracked something inside me. I cried, not because I'd lost a title. Because I'd lost the man who had once stayed awake beside me assembling investor presentations on our apartment floor. The man who used to whisper, "One day they'll know your name." Apparently he'd decided they'd remember his instead. By evening, every business website carried the same headline. Visionary founder Daniel Bennett assumes sole executive leadership. Founder. Another lie. My phone vibrated endlessly. Journalists, friends, former employees. I ignored them all until one message appeared from an unknown number. "Don't delete the files before you see what's inside. He forgot they still sync to your old cloud account." Attached was a folder. Hundreds of documents. Board correspondence. Private emails. Meeting recordings. At first I assumed someone was playing a cruel joke. Then I opened the oldest email. Subject line: "Removing Claire without litigation risk." My pulse slowed instead of quickening. The strange calm returned. They hadn't betrayed me in a single meeting. They'd been planning it for 8 months. Every dinner where Daniel claimed he had late meetings. Every weekend conference. Every reassuring kiss before work. Every promise that, we're in this together. It had all been choreography. I leaned back in my seat as rain blurred the windshield into silver streaks. For the first time that day, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what they had overlooked. Because while Daniel had spent 8 months planning how to remove me from my chair, he had completely forgotten who had built the floor beneath it. I went home after midnight, not because I wanted to see Daniel, but because I wanted to see how comfortably he could live inside the lie he'd created. The house was quiet except for the soft clink of glass from the kitchen. He stood at the counter pouring himself a drink, still wearing the tie I had given him on our 10th anniversary. "You should have answered your phone," he said without turning around. "I was busy. You'll understand eventually. This wasn't personal." I almost smiled. Nothing wounds more deeply than betrayal disguised as necessity. I'll remember that. He finally faced me. There was caution in his eyes, but not remorse. He believed the hardest part was over. In his mind, I had already become yesterday's headline. "You'll receive a generous settlement." "A settlement? For your shares, your exit package." "My shares," I interrupted quietly. "Those are two different things." His jaw tightened for the briefest moment. "There are legal mechanisms." "I know. I wrote most of them." That silence lasted only seconds, but it revealed everything. Daniel had relied on lawyers to interpret agreements I had personally drafted years earlier. He had forgotten why they were written so carefully in the first place. "I don't want to fight you," he said. "You already did." I walked past him toward our bedroom. His suitcase was open on the bed. "Traveling. Board retreat. How convenient." He sighed as though I were being unreasonable. "This doesn't have to become ugly." I looked directly into his eyes. "No, it doesn't." That answer seemed to relax him. He mistook restraint for weakness. He always had. The next morning I drove to the smallest office our company still leased across town. Almost no one remembered it existed. Years ago I had insisted we keep it as a disaster recovery site. Daniel had mocked me for wasting money. Inside, the receptionist nearly burst into tears. "Ms. Bennett, I thought, you thought I'd disappeared." She nodded. Within an hour, 3 former department heads quietly arrived after receiving encrypted messages from me. Marcus from compliance, Priya from finance, Helen from operations. People Daniel had gradually pushed aside because they questioned him instead of flattering him. Marcus closed the office door. "They're deleting archives." I expected that. Priya slid a flash drive across the table. I copied financial backups before they revoked my access. Helen unfolded several handwritten notes. "I've kept records of every instruction that didn't make sense." I looked at each of them. "You know helping me could end your careers." Marcus gave a tired laugh. "Our careers ended the moment integrity became inconvenient." For the first time since the board meeting, I didn't feel alone. We weren't building revenge. We were rebuilding the truth. For days we worked quietly. No interviews. No dramatic social media posts. No public accusations. Silence became our greatest advantage. Daniel celebrated his promotion across every business publication. Television interviews painted him as the visionary who had courageously modernized leadership. Every appearance inflated his confidence. The more attention he received, the less carefully he checked the foundations beneath him. Patterns emerged from the files. Board members had received consulting contracts through shell companies. Executive bonuses had been approved before performance targets existed. Internal forecasts shown during my removal had been altered after my access was revoked. The evidence wasn't explosive because of one shocking document. It was devastating because hundreds of ordinary documents fit together perfectly. Like pieces of a puzzle no one expected anyone else to solve. Late one evening Evelyn called. "I shouldn't be calling." "No," I agreed. "But you are." She inhaled slowly. "I voted against my conscience." "I know. They threatened to expose my son's bankruptcy." I closed my eyes. "So they blackmailed you." I signed a statement before the meeting. "They already had everything prepared." "Would you testify if necessary?" Her answer came after a long silence. "I'm tired of being afraid." When the call ended, I realized something important. Daniel hadn't built loyalty, he'd built fear. Fear never survives once someone speaks first. 3 weeks after my removal, an invitation arrived for the company's annual Innovation Gala. My name was still printed beneath, Founding Visionaries. Someone in marketing hadn't received the memo. Daniel's assistant immediately emailed to withdraw the invitation. Too late. I already had it. The gala filled the city's Grand Museum with investors, journalists, politicians, and cameras. Crystal chandeliers reflected across marble floors while waiters carried champagne between conversations worth millions. I entered wearing the same navy suit. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Daniel saw me from across the room. For a fraction of a second, genuine panic crossed his face before he replaced it with practiced confidence. He approached with a polished smile. You shouldn't be here. I was invited. My assistant corrected that, but not the guest list. People nearby pretended not to listen. I kept my voice warm enough that no one could accuse me of causing a scene. Congratulations on your promotion. Thank you. I imagine you're enjoying my office. His smile stiffened. It belongs to the company. It always did. An investor interrupted us. Daniel, your keynote starts in 5 minutes. He nodded, grateful for the escape. As he walked toward the stage, he looked back once. I simply wished him good luck. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. The ballroom lights dimmed. Applause thundered as Daniel stepped behind the podium. He began speaking about vision. About trust. About ethical leadership. The irony was almost unbearable. From my seat near the back, my phone vibrated. Marcus had sent only 4 words. They're ready to cooperate. One after another, messages followed. 3 directors. Then 5. Then 7. Each had contacted independent counsel within the last hour. Each had decided protecting Daniel was no longer worth the personal risk. I looked up at the stage where my husband smiled beneath the spotlight, completely unaware that the audience applauding him tonight would soon become witnesses to the careful collapse of everything he had stolen. And for the first time since they stripped me of my seat, I realized I no longer wanted my position back. I wanted something far more permanent. I wanted the truth to become the only story no one in that room could escape. The applause washed over Daniel as though it belonged to him forever. He stood beneath the lights speaking about integrity with the effortless confidence of a man who had never imagined consequences could catch up with him. Every polished sentence earned another smile from investors, another approving nod from journalists, another flash from a photographer's camera. I watched without interrupting. There is a peculiar strength in allowing someone to climb to the highest point before removing the ladder they built from lies. When his speech ended, he raised a glass. To the future. The room echoed the toast. I did not. Instead, I quietly left through a side entrance. By sunrise, our legal filings had reached every appropriate regulator, the company's independent audit committee, and every board member's attorney. We didn't leak a single document to the press. We followed every rule Daniel had assumed I would ignore in a fit of anger. Marcus coordinated the compliance records. Priya reconstructed the altered financial reports. Helen organized timelines so meticulously that every email, every approval, every payment fit together without contradiction. Evelyn signed her sworn statement before noon. Then another director did the same. Then another. Fear had finally changed sides. By mid-afternoon, emergency board meetings were replacing celebratory interviews. My phone rang constantly. I answered none of them. The first public headline appeared just after sunset. Not about me. About the company's announcement that an independent investigation had begun into executive governance and financial reporting. Daniel's name was nowhere in the statement. It didn't need to be. Everyone knew who had been in charge. 2 days later he appeared at the house. He looked older than he had a week before. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. They've suspended me. I remained in the garden, trimming the roses my mother had planted years earlier. I'm sorry to hear that. Claire. It was the first time he'd spoken my name without certainty. They're saying I manipulated the board. You did. They're twisting everything. I set the shears down. No, Daniel. They're untwisting it. His shoulders dropped. I made mistakes. You made choices. I was under pressure. Weren't we both? He opened his mouth but couldn't answer. For years I had carried impossible expectations without betraying anyone. Pressure had never forced his hand. Ambition had. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at him for a long moment. That sentence might have comforted me once. Now it sounded like an excuse rehearsed in front of a mirror. You spent 8 months planning my removal. It became bigger than I expected. No, I shook my head. It became exactly what you intended until it stopped benefiting you. He stepped closer. If you withdraw your statements. I didn't file opinions. What? I filed evidence. His face lost what little color remained. There isn't anything to withdraw. For the first time since we'd met 20 years earlier, Daniel looked genuinely powerless. Not because I had taken anything from him. Because the truth had. The investigation lasted 4 months. During that time I stayed almost invisible. No television interviews. No triumphant magazine covers. Whenever reporters camped outside my gate, I simply thanked them and declined comment. That frustrated everyone. They wanted a dramatic public war. I refused to give them one. Meanwhile, facts continued doing their quiet work. Forensic accountants confirmed altered projections. Independent auditors verified deleted records had been recovered. Board communications revealed coordinated efforts to remove me while concealing conflicts of interest. Several directors resigned before the final report was even completed. Others cooperated in exchange for reduced liability. Daniel fought harder than anyone. Until he couldn't. The board that had unanimously voted to remove me voted again. This time the decision was equally unanimous. His employment was terminated. His executive compensation was cancelled under the misconduct provisions I had personally insisted be added years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same governance policies he had mocked as overly cautious ultimately ended his career. Months later I was invited to attend the annual shareholders meeting. Not as CEO. The position had gone to an experienced executive from outside the company. Exactly as it should. I had no desire to reclaim the office where trust had been traded for convenience. Instead, the chairman asked if I would accept a newly created role overseeing long-term governance reform. I smiled. Only if the authority is independent. It will be, and if no future CEO can remove that independence. He nodded. The documents are already drafted. This time I read every page before signing. When the meeting concluded, shareholders stood and applauded. The sound felt completely different from the applause Daniel had received months earlier. This wasn't admiration built on illusion. It was respect earned after surviving one. As people slowly filtered out, Evelyn approached me. I owe you an apology. You owe yourself forgiveness first. Tears filled her eyes. I should have stood with you. You stood when it mattered most. She squeezed my hand. You could have destroyed all of us. I never wanted that. What did you want? I looked around the room where my chair had once disappeared. I wanted no one else to lose theirs the way I lost mine. The divorce became final on a quiet Tuesday morning. No arguments, no cameras, no dramatic courtroom confrontation, just signatures. As we left the courthouse, Daniel stopped beside me. I keep wondering when I lost you. I answered honestly. You didn't lose me the day I walked out of that boardroom. He looked at me, waiting. You lost me the moment you watched them take my seat, and decided to stay in yours. He closed his eyes. There was nothing left to say. I walked away without looking back. Not because I hated him. Hatred would have chained me to the worst chapter of my life. I chose something far more difficult. I chose to leave him alone with every decision he had made. A year later I opened a leadership foundation dedicated to mentoring women whose ideas were constantly credited to someone else. Every scholarship carried my mother's favorite sentence. Wear blue when you need people to remember your strength. The navy suit still hung in my closet. I never threw it away. It reminded me that dignity isn't measured by the chair beneath you. It is measured by the grace with which you stand after someone tries to take it away. Daniel had believed stripping me of my seat would erase everything I had built. Instead, he only gave me the distance I needed to see that my greatest achievement had never been the company. It was becoming the woman who could lose everything in a single morning. And still win by refusing to lose herself.